Okay, what you guys think? Two different speeches, two different purposes, two different deliveries. What do you think?
Honestly, I thought the tone of the first speech was inappropriate.
Okay. What do you mean by not appropriate?
It's not an opinion, but I thought that it was too jokey. Okay, concrete answers here. I didn't like, he seemed too loose. He seemed just not fully there. But
okay.
Maybe it's because I have a vested interest. I worked close to where it happened. I don't mean to make it personal. I didn't like his presence there, or his tone.
Well, his presence there, I mean, he's president of the United States.
You're right,
it's the site of a major attack on the nation.
Yes, sir.
His presence there is not to be questioned. Okay? If he had not been there, then he would have been crucified. So the question is not whether or not he should have been there, but what did he do when he was there? Okay?
You're right.
Okay? All right, so we have one person that has kind of issues with the delivery. What else?
It was two different demeanors.
Yeah? And was that appropriate?
I feel like Obama was appropriate. I mean, he was saying everything that happened, but President Bush is just really short. His stance, the way he was, I know you taught to stand a certain way and have our shoulders, and he wasn't doing that the whole time.
Okay.
It was kind of hard to understand him, especially when he kept moving.
Okay. But again, remember, a lot of that's based on the environment. Some of the things you said, the mechanics of the speech, you were speaking through a bullhorn in the middle of, standing on a pile that is still burning, literally burning underneath him. So there's not, when it's not necessarily, and there's a lot of machinery going on around him. So the volume and things like that, okay, we can give him a pass on that. But, his demeanor is something that, should be questioned, okay?
I mean, with all circumstances, given, him being at the site, everybody still being around him, and it not being, a formal, speech. I mean, even with that taken in, I just think that he didn't really give too much effort into thinking about it. He kind of just covered a bunch of basic bases, and it was just
okay. So what should he have done in that instance?
I don't know. So I can't offer better.
Okay. So whenever somebody says, well, I wouldn't have said that, my immediate question is going to be, fine, what would you have said? Okay, and the question is, okay, and we'll get to my opinion in a minute.
I think, President Bush's speech, his was more for morale, to boost morale.
Okay.
For all these men that have been working 24 hours straight, no sleep, and so it was kind of supposed to be informal. It was motivational, right, speech, where President Obama came out of the White House. What is it? That Rose Garden they call it?
No, that was that was inside in the I think it's like the treaty room.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he came in a suit and tie. That was more for. I mean, if he came out with a bullhorn and a members only jacket, there it would seem weird.
I don't think President Bush was wearing a members only jacket.
It looked like it.
It was a windbreaker, but yeah, members only. That's a little 1984. Okay. But I get what you're saying.
It's like she said, I think President Bush's speech was to uplift the morale of the people at the time who were working there. Obama was trying to inform the country of what was going on and how we were handling the situation with Osama bin Laden.
Okay.
His was more informative, and Bush's was more morale speech.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody want to make any comments about it? I mean, we've talked very little about President Obama's speech. A lot about President Bush's speech. What did y'all think of President Obama there?
It was really.
Hold on a second.
It was really. I want to say it was really dry. Compared to Bush's, it was really dry and straight.
Very low key.
Yeah.
I won't say necessarily dry.
Yeah, it wasn't dry.
I will say very low key. Okay.
His was more about the facts and just to the point.
Okay.
No extra stuff.
Pretty direct.
Yes.
Okay. What else? You think his tone? Somebody over here was going to say something.
Very formal.
Very formal. Yeah. Okay. I'll agree with that.
I thought his tone was appropriate. I thought he was also trying to not play up. Well, we got him, even though we got his message loud and clear. It was justice has been served. we're not happy about any of this that has happened. I thought it's almost picture-perfect tone
Okay.
and message, in my opinion.
Okay. So let me go back. Let me give you my opinions on both of these. Okay. And point out some things that you may not have noticed. You notice that President Bush had an almost memorized script he was sticking to. Okay. I mean, those were not spontaneous words. You know, for days he had been planning on going up there. He had a speech. He had almost memorized that speech. Now, some things happened that sort of took him away from that text, right? And so somebody said, we can't hear you. And he goes, but I can hear you. And, you know, and the whole country can hear you. And pretty soon the whole world will hear all of us, okay? Yeah, and that got a little rah-rah for me. Got a little pep rally-ish, okay? I will absolutely agree to that. But again, you got to remember where he was and, like you said, who he was talking to. Okay, now we're going to look, and this is not the first speech President Bush gave about this event. We're gonna have a day where we do nothing but look at presidential crisis speeches. Okay, we're going to look back at FDR's speech after Pearl Harbor. We're going to look at President Reagan's speech after the Challenger space shuttle exploded. We're going to look at George H.W. Bush after Iraq invades Kuwait. We're going to look at a whole series of them. One of the ones we're going to look at is President Bush's 9/11 address. Okay, so yeah, you're right. I think that when I first saw it, I was, again, remember, I was working in England. We had evacuated our base. Every day. The first day I got back into my office, I walked outside and two Royal Air Force Tornadoes were circling the base because our building was a known target. Okay, so to me, when I know that we're and again, I'm heavily engaged in a lot of planning and everything else, I know we're ramping up for a lot of operations, and he's up there going, giving a pep rally. So for me, the first time I saw it, I was really upset. Now, what are we at now? 18 years, 19 years later, I can see more what he was trying to do for the guys on the ground.
Would his speech be comparable to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg?
No.
But didn't President Bush gave a speech at night? In the
Yes,
law
and we'll look at that later. I've already said that. Yeah, we'll look at that. And again,
The
this
Bullhorn
is
speech wasn't.
yeah. No, I'm not arguing with that point, and we're going to look at that speech later. President Obama's speech, and if I told you why I watched that, I'd be in jail for the next 30 years. So my concern with President Obama's speech was he used the first person pronoun a little often. Okay, he said I, me. There's a couple of places where he really sort of made it about himself. Now, there's a couple of reasons I don't really get upset by that. Number one, you remember what we did that day, okay? We took an armed force without the permission of the host country, inserted them into a foreign nation, assaulted a compound with the intent of killing someone, okay? Based on a presidential finding. And that's a formal legal document where the president signs it, physically signs it, and says, it's okay to go kill this guy without a trial. Okay? Want everyone to understand that. While on the outside, at Lafayette Park, right across from the White House, a bunch of drunk frat boys are climbing telephone poles and screaming USA like we just won a hockey game. The president of the United States has got to go before the world and ask Pakistan not to declare war on us. Does everybody understand that? Or at a minimum say, you're not flying through our airspace anymore to support Afghanistan, at which point we're screwed. Okay? So President Obama has a very fine line he has to toe. Second of all, it is possible at some point in time in the future, every person on that raid could be accused and tried for war crimes. Okay? Because they did not go in there to take a prisoner. It was known that they went in there. It wasn't a capture-kill mission. It was a kill Osama bin Laden mission. President of the United States had to take full, complete legal responsibility for that. Okay, now a lot of people screamed he made it too much about him. But that whole part where he said, I ordered this and I ordered that, and this week I signed a document that allowed them to. He's legally taking full responsibility for any legal repercussions that come out of this mission. Okay? Everybody understand that? I think his tone was nearly perfect. Okay? If he'd come out there and gone, woohoo, we got him! Okay? Pakistan declares war the next day.
Yeah.
Okay? And if Pakistan declares war, We've got 20,000 guys in Afghanistan that we can't feed, clothe, or house. Okay? I mean, Pakistan, for all the criticism I could heap on them, have been essential to our operations in Afghanistan. So does everybody understand these two very vital, very important speeches and the very narrow lines that both presidents had to walk to make these effective speeches? Okay? A lot of people heap criticism, and yeah, there's a political divide. A lot of Democrats, although they didn't admit it at the time, because who's going to criticize the presidents 2 days after a massive attack? Okay? But I mean, President Obama, Republicans crucified him or tried to for that speech. Okay? He was too somber. He was too first-person focused. Again, I wasn't comfortable with it, but can I see why he did it? And that's what I'm asking for you to do as we go through this speech. Of course, I don't expect you to like every speech I show you. Question is, what was President Bush's and President Obama's purpose? How did they deliver the speech? And did they achieve the effect they wanted? Okay? Everybody got that? Okay, so let's jump into it. All right? So where we're at now in human development is technology can assist our communication, but technology can't communicate for us, right? I mean, you've still got to type what you want to put in the email. You still have to get your thumbs out and text. So human communication is still done by humans. We communicate and we do public speaking for 3 basic reasons. And we're going to delve into them all in a lot more detail as the course goes on. The first reason we do it is to inform. All right? And an informative speech is nothing more than I have information A and I want to give it to you. Okay? Straightforward, not persuasive, no any addition. I've got something you need to know, I need to communicate to you. Okay? The second reason we do it is to persuade. Which, after a persuasive speech, there will be a change of behavior or a change of attitude or belief on your part. Okay? And like we said, we've discussed persuasive speaking. We all do it all the time. Okay? If you're in sales, we're going to go through one, that you hear people say, well, I've never heard of the motivated sequence before. If you've ever bought a car, you've heard of the motivated sequence. Okay? And the third, okay, is to entertain. Giving a speech where all you do is get up and make people laugh and make people relax for a few minutes is a perfectly valid way to do that. Okay? It's a perfectly valid reason to give a public speech. So our 3 reasons for giving a public speech are to inform, to persuade, and to entertain. So, that's why we do it. So let's talk about communication a little bit. Somebody give me a definition of communication. There's one in your textbook. Okay, nobody read the textbook, we can see now.
I would say getting across a message from A to B.
Getting across a message from A to B, okay?
Verbal and nonverbal skills.
Verbal and nonverbal skills, okay? That's part of it. Relaying information.
Expression of your thoughts.
An expression of your thoughts. Okay. I think all of those are good. There's a couple of things that I would go. A relay of information. Okay. You can have a switch relay information. Okay. Expression of your thoughts. Everybody, people probably in this room have probably kept journals. That's expressing your thoughts, but is that communication?
So you have to do it verbally then?
Well, verbally, now, and I'm not picking on you, okay, but I will tell you, I was driving up I-20 the other day coming to campus, and some guy cut me off, and I did not verbally communicate with him, okay? But I can tell you that I believe he understood that I was not happy with his driving style.
I was going to say a process in which information is communicated by a legible message or verbal message.
A mutually understood message. Okay, you're all kind of banging away at the different points, and to be honest with you, I'm not going to give you a hardcore definition. This is what communication is, because everybody can come up with a different way to phrase it. What I am going to do is I'm going to tell you exactly what you have to have communication. Okay, everybody understand that? So we're going to talk about the parts of communication and the human communication process. And again, human communication is quite different than any other kind of communication. right? Okay. Do we know that certain species other than humans communicate with each other?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Even now they now say plants have an ability to pass information between each other. Okay, based on any number of things. Okay, I'll buy it. The research is there. Okay, but your dog communicates. Okay, my dog has this lovely habit of literally one of my dogs. I got 2 dogs. They're both rescues. One is very smart. The other was very strong. Okay, and the smart one, when he thinks he should be fed, will actually bring his bowl into the living room and sit there and go. I mean, with his bowl, he's not a big dog. He weighs about 45 pounds, and he's got this big bowl, and he's like, and I'm like going, I guess he's hungry, okay? My dog and I, is that communication? We'll discuss that. It's possible. Okay, so the first thing you need is participants. Participants. And you have to have at least 2. Now, in my interpersonal communication class, the text we're using, the author goes into great detail about intrapersonal communication. What do you think intrapersonal communication is?
Communicate with yourself.
Communication within one person. Now, if we said in one common aspect of everything you said was that there was an exchange of information. Okay? Can you exchange information with yourself? What? Between your conscious and your unconscious, but if it's really your unconscious, are you aware of it?
What if you're reading? Is that
No. Okay, but how many participants are there in that?
Probably 2.
Actually, where's the information coming from? You're an author, for God's sake.
I think you read your own stuff.
I'm just being honest. Keeping it real, as you young folks say. All right? Why y'all laugh at that? Whenever I say that's what the young folk do, everybody goes, look at the old guy. All right. Can you really, and when do you really have a conversation with yourself? Really? Really? Okay, if anybody wants to volunteer about what they converse with themselves about, go ahead and tell me.
I mean, if you don't have a plan, because I don't like a plan, so I know the day-to-day things or what I have to do every day just so I don't forget, because I don't like writing it down.
But you already knew there was no information exchange.
Reminding yourself.
That's not new information, though.
We didn't say new information.
I'll do it.
Yeah, it's an exchange of information. She's not exchanging. You're going through a schedule that you were already familiar with. You're not adding new information. You're not saying like, okay.
I converse with myself about work and how I'm going to kill the tables I don't like.
Kill the what?
Tables. I'm a server.
Okay, what restaurant?
That's not important.
Yeah, it is. It will be before the end of the class. Somebody else has something to say over here.
I talk to myself when I think there's something about me that I need to correct.
Okay, now, are you talking to yourself, or are you just giving verbal reinforcement to something you already know to be true? Okay, so a long time ago, back when I was doing counterintelligence investigations for the National Security Agency, we got a briefing from one of the on-staff psychologists. And one of the things they told us is, if someone reports to you that someone's talking to themselves, that's not a sign of mental illness. What's a sign of mental illness is if the person doesn't control both ends of the conversation. Okay, so if your brain is telling you to kill the people at table 12, okay, that's schizophrenia. That's a mental disorder, okay? It's very difficult. I've never heard an instance where I've heard someone give me an example. Yeah, you can synthesize new ideas by talking to yourself verbally, but you already had all the information you needed to come up with that new idea. You weren't really talking to yourself. You were verbalizing ideas. Everybody understand what I'm saying? Now, some people come up and say, well, what if I'm in prayer and I hear God's voice? Okay, I'm not going to get into the theological argument. What I would tell you is that's a second participant. Okay, it's you and God. All right, does everybody understand what I'm saying there? I oftentimes have people come to my office and say, I want to discuss your theory of prayer here, and it's, okay. I'm not going to do that, but what I'm saying is prayer would not be an example of intrapersonal. So we are going to say that you have to have 2 or more. Okay? What's the limit on how many people you can communicate with at one time? It's about 7.3 billion, as I understand now. We haven't figured out how to have a conversation with people off planet yet that aren't in our species, or at least located on our planet. Okay? So theoretically, it's possible. I mean, this is something I heard the other day. You know what the most watched annual sporting event is every year? Nope.
No. It's the World Series?
Nope.
WrestleMania.
Only in trailer parks. Okay, that was uncalled for. I apologize for that. I'm sorry. Number one, the most watched annual sporting event every year is the Tour de France. 3.8 billion people on average watch some part of the Tour de France. Yeah, 3.8 billion. Okay? When Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, he was speaking to like 60% of the world's population all at once. Okay? All right, so, other thing. How many of y'all got children? Okay, it's okay if you don't. How many of y'all have parents? Okay, I should see a lot more hands. All right? How many of y'all have ever, as a parent or as a child, had to, heard the phrase, "Are you even listening to me?"
Every day.
Okay. Yeah, I've got two. I love my daughters. I've had great relations. I've never gone through that hideous period with my daughters that a lot of people claim to. I've never said, been one of those people that say I hate my children, but I will tell you there have been times that I have been talking to them and I'm just going like, where are you right now? Okay? So I have two daughters. One's 26. She is a mathematician. She is every bit a mathematician. She's currently making a hell of a lot more money than I am in working in cybersecurity in Washington, D.C. My other daughter is an art major. Okay? One is incredibly nonverbal. The other one is incredibly verbal. And when the youngest one and I, it was relatively soon after 9/11, to be honest with you, we're driving down the road, and she is talking. Just talking. And I got, I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. I got a million different issues I got to deal with. And I finally just looked over at her and I went, "Sweetheart, I got to admit, I haven't been listening to you for about the last 5 minutes. I'm really sorry about that. If you need to go back, that's okay, but I'm really having trouble concentrating." And she said, "That's okay," and just kept talking. Okay? She's one of those true extroverts that has to verbalize everything before she accepts it. Okay? Is being reality. Were we communicating? No, not really. And for that, she occasionally brings that up as a joke. Okay, second thing you have to have a message. Okay? This is why you want to communicate. Also, it's what you want to communicate. It can be verbal, it can be visual, it can be nonverbal. Okay? How many of y'all are walking down the halls and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And have no desire whatsoever to get, if anybody ever does that, just go, "Hey, how you doing?" "Dude, my dog's sick."
It happens to me at work all the time.
Okay? And people, they'll look at you like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you telling me that?" "Well, you just asked me." Okay? Even something as innocuous as, "Hey, how you doing?" Even though you have no intention to get any real response, what message are you trying to send?
I care about you.
I care about you, even if it's a lie, okay, and you don't really care. You're still trying to communicate to them that you care about them, okay? So your message is what you're trying to convey. Now, we're going to discuss it in a little while. You need to be worried about encoding and decoding. All right? Because is the message you intended to send always the message that the receiver decodes?
No.
Yeah. Okay? My wife has looked at me and gone, "Is that what you're wearing?" When we're going out to dinner or something, she'll look at me and go, "Is that what you're wearing?" I'm going like, "I'm going back upstairs to change." She go, "Well, why are you doing that? I just asked you a question." I took that question as being critical of what I was wearing. Okay? And just so you guys know, this is what I wear. If I'm going out of the house, I probably got on a pair of khaki slacks and a golf shirt. I've got my formal khaki wash and wears that I wear to work. I got the cargo pants I wear, to out. Okay, I do have suits. I just never wear them anymore. Okay, but the question she had encoded was simply asking, "Is that what you're wearing? Or are we ready to go?" What I decoded is, I don't like what you're wearing. Go change. Was it the same message? Yeah, it encoded and decoded differently. We're going to talk about that in more detail a little bit later on. You have to have a channel. Okay? If I wanted to communicate with someone in North Dakota and I didn't have a phone, could I communicate with them?
Yes.
Okay, let's say if I wanted to communicate with someone in North Dakota and I had no electronic devices, can I communicate with them today?
Yes.
Not today.
How am I going to communicate with them today?
You can write a letter.
What?
You can write a letter.
Yeah, but that ain't going to get there for 3 days.
So,
What did you say?
Oh, no.
Okay. All right, I have to have a means. A lot of times our channel, okay, is verbal. People that we're having contact with face to face. Okay, nowadays you guys have got a million different ways to communicate with someone. In fact, the idea of not being able to communicate with someone anywhere in the world. Okay, I tell when I was 2003, we were moving from the United Kingdom to San Antonio, Texas, and my real estate agent, who I fired a couple of days later, calls us up and said, "Hey, listen, we got all the contracts. We had FedExed all the contracts back from our home in North Yorkshire, and then we had taken off it was literally our last week in the United Kingdom, and we had taken off for a trip up through Scotland, and so." We're driving around, and I wake up in the hotel, and I call my real estate agent. I say, "Hey, did you get all the papers?" She said, "Yeah, but where's the check?" And I went, "What check are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, I needed a check for $14,384.62. And I'm like going, "When the hell did you tell me that?" And she goes, "It was at the bottom of the form that the HUD-1 form." And I'm like going, "Did I sign the HUD-1 form?" "No." "Did you tell me to look at that form?" "No, but it was in the packet. You should have known to." Okay, I bought one house in my entire life, and that was 12 years ago. Okay? Don't throw this on me. You failed here. Now I've got to compensate. Give me a number of a bank I can transfer money to. Okay? So later on that day, I'm on the phone. We are on the Isle of Mull, which is just off the coast of Scotland. And I'm standing there. I call my credit union back in Maryland. And I said, "Okay, I need to transfer some money." The guy was really, really straightforward, really helpful. I gave him all the information. He said, "I'll take care of it. Call me back in about 2 hours." And I said, "Well, give me your extension because I'm not going through the switchboard again." So I call him back. And he sits there and goes, "Yeah, transfer's complete." And he sits there and goes, "Great, thanks." I forget his name. "I really appreciate your efforts." And I did write a nice little note to the bank manager that this guy had been incredibly helpful. And he says, "Hey, listen, can I ask you a question?" And this was in 2003, remember? This was 16 years ago. He says, "You really in Scotland?" And I was going like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Wait a minute. You called from Scotland to your credit union in Maryland to buy a house in San Antonio, so we had to transfer money to a bank in St. Louis." And he's going like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what we did." And he's going like, "That's pretty awesome." And I'm like, "I'm glad I could help you out today." Okay? But think about it. You guys grew up in an environment. How many in here are under 25 years of age? You guys grew up in an environment working on the premise that you can call anybody in the world at any time you want, right? I can communicate with anybody, anywhere, anytime. You know there's more cell phones than people on this planet right now? Okay, but remember, you still have to have a channel. Okay, I got off track. All right, you need feedback. Okay? Feedback. And that's not like technical feedback where you put your headphones over a microphone, okay? Feedback. Because communication is always a two-person process. We'll talk about the dialogic theory in just a minute. All right? I'm getting feedback from everybody in this class right now. A couple of people, maybe a third of the class, pretty interested. The third of the class, half the class, still here. A couple of people apparently gone to the Bahamas from the looks on their faces. I mean, when I see you, I look out at this room and I see people not taking notes, kind of going, they are not at Aiken Technical College. Okay? All right, and the last thing you have to have, oh, that is the last thing you have to have, okay? You have to have 2 or more participants. You have to have a message to encode or decode. You have to have a channel, and you have to have feedback. Okay?
What did you mean by channel again?
Has to be a method for communication. It can be a phone. It can be an email. It can be the human voice. It can be a billboard out on the side of I-20. Okay? It just needs to be a means for communicating the message or moving the information you have to your audience. And there's a million, you can name, smoke signals. Anybody know what a heliograph is? It's where you flash lights and Morse code from a mirror. Okay? Those are all still, they all work. Signal flags. All of that. You have to have some sort of means to communicate. Okay? Let me check real quick, see if I've got this up. All right, let's talk about some models real quick. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you is, and I've told you this before, the first real deep treatise on the nature of human communication was written by Aristotle. And believe it or not, everybody's familiar with Aristotle, right? 4th century BCE, was a Greek. He wrote a book called On Rhetoric, okay? Really, there haven't been a whole lot of updates since then. Because humans haven't really evolved all that much. Physiologically, mentally, we're all pretty much the same. Aristotle broke it down into 4 basic parts. There was a speaker, there was the speech, there was the audience, and there was the effect you hope to achieve. Okay, the key thing about this is, and then the occasion provided an entire context for this. Okay? It's your participants, your message, your second participant, your channel was the occasion. So you've got your 4 basic parts. But Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, wrote that there were, and I'm going to post all these I'll post this on the Blackboard site today. What Aristotle was identified was what he felt were the key components of rhetoric. And Aristotle felt that all human communication was designed to persuade at some level. Okay? So, 2,500 years later, a guy named Laswell, does this look familiar to you guys?
No.
It's the same thing. The only difference is he's gone in here and switched the occasion as the broader context, because remember, Aristotle only had one medium or one channel. Really. You couldn't publish a novel back then. The only channel you had was the spoken voice. So he's changed. You just got the speaker, their message, the medium or the context or the occasion, the receiver, and the effect. I will tell you, Laswell got rich with this model. Okay? Any of y'all watch Mad Men? Okay, through the 1950s, Mad Men's about a 1960s ad agency. Okay? Through the 1950s and 1960s, we had this oracle sitting in our living rooms for the first time, where there were people who came out and told us stuff in our living rooms. It was awesome. And all you had to do was buy commercial time, and people believed whatever the little box was telling you. Okay? And then people began to realize, maybe cigarettes aren't good for your health like they've been telling me on TV. So television advertising became less and less effective. Well, in 1978, Laswell comes out with this model, and again, behind this model, there's a whole lot of research. And basically, he sits there and goes, the primary thing you've got to think about is what effect are you going for, and are you achieving it? Okay? And thus we get things like focus groups, where no commercial goes on network television because it costs about $1 million a half a minute. Okay? No TV commercial goes on network television until it's been tested to ensure that commercial gets the effect they want. Okay? And I'm not trying to beat you over the head with Laswell's model, okay? But just to let you know that there's not a whole lot new here. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about dialogic theory. One of the things that before, okay, See, if I had been a college instructor in the 1950s, my life would be a lot easier. I would just stand up here, and again, I had these guys, when I went through, I attended Mississippi State and Auburn University, and when I went to there were guys that were still up there that would just go, the Habsburg Empire was formed in 1748 during a period of unrest in Central Europe. And they were just drawn on like that. And you were expected to take notes, and you were not expected to ask questions in class. And there were instances, even when I was in college in the 1980s, where if you had the temerity to ask a professor a question, he might kick you out of class. Because these guys had gotten tenure in 1953, and they just wouldn't die. Okay? So dialogic theory says that even though you're not speaking, and even though we're in a public communication environment, we are having a conversation. Now, how do you guys communicate back to me? Because I do most of the talking in these classes. You raise your hand. Oh, I didn't realize that was your answer to the question. Not just, okay. Nonverbal communication? Kinesics? Eye contact? What else? You guys may not think I noticed, but when I see people out there going like, okay? At least one person does not understand what I'm talking about at this point. So what we began to realize was that dialogue is more natural than a monologue. Okay? When my mom would used to think she was having a monologue, think she was lecturing me, think she was yelling at me, and I'm like sitting there going like, if it was a monologue, why did she keep getting angrier? Okay? Meanings are in people, not words. So we have to exchange information between the two of us all the time in order for there to be effective communication. In contexts or social situations, improve perceived meanings. Okay? Does everybody understand? So for me to look at you and say, hey, what kind of car do you drive? Okay, that's just a natural question. For me to look at you and go, hey, how you doing? What kind of car do you drive? Okay? Does that not make it creepy?
It does.
It does. Okay?
What kind of car do you drive?
What kind of car do you drive? Okay? Again, we have a dialogue and not a monologue, even in public speakings. Again, we'll talk about encoding and decoding in a minute. Context and social situations have impact. Physical dimensions are important. Like I said, I've dressed a group of 8,000 people. Was I able to make eye contact with all 8,000? That would be time consuming. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? 8,000 times. Okay? And then there's a cultural dimension. And we're going to discuss culture and all that good stuff a little bit later on. But you have to acknowledge that. Okay? I mean, if it's a cultural dimension, because, if I was in the Middle East and I was handing out papers in a class, as I've done, and the first time I did it, walked up to, I believe they were Egyptian, and I had a piece of paper in my hand, and I went, okay, I'm going to give everybody a copy of this, and I did that. Anybody see what I'm doing wrong?
Not making eye contact.
What?
Yeah, that was the left hand.
Passing out with your left hand. To a Middle Easterner, this is a horrendous insult. Because when you don't have what we consider basic essentials, this is called your body hand, and is used to take care of all your bodily functions. And so when I hand somebody something with my left hand, they know I have, I probably washed but it doesn't make any difference. In their culture, that is a massive insult. Okay? If you want to engage with people from the Middle East, you're going to have to get over that, at least in formal situations. Okay? All right.
That's for real.
Absolutely.
I've never heard that.
The other thing you got to get used to is that is there a male in here that would not be uncomfortable with me holding his hand for a minute? Come on up. Come here. So I'm going into Qatar Airport, into Doha International Airport. Okay? Just stand right here. Okay? And there were some problems with my visa. Okay, I was a Department of Defense civilian. It was 2004. We were still ironing out how we got into Qatar so we could then fly into Iraq. They're not looking at me going, oh, you're a contractor. And I go, no, I'm a DOD civilian. Oh, you're a military. No, I'm a DOD civilian. Well, they couldn't figure out what the hell to do with me. So he calls his lieutenant, this is this little guy with a beard. Okay, he comes over and he goes, you will stand here with me. And I'm going like, okay, sure. And he goes, and I'm like sitting there going, don't react, don't react, don't react, don't react, don't react, don't react. To them, he's not establishing power. He's not establishing control. He was just showing me that he's going to be standing here with me until the guy comes back with my papers. Okay, you feeling comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm okay with that. But for me, it was, I just tried to deaden my arm because it was completely and totally unexpected. I'm just like, the whole rest of my body's going like, I don't know what this guy's up to. I've never experienced that. I had studied with Egyptians and Syrians, and they told us that, but the first time it happens to you, you're caught off guard. Okay? And after that, 4 months in Iraq, a total of over a year in Afghanistan, you get used to it.
Does it happen that often?
It happens all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if somebody wants to, we would say, go over there or follow me. Those guys will just, they'll take their, they'll put their right hand into your left hand and then they will escort you over.
I see.
Yeah. And it's completely normal. Okay, so we talked about encoding and decoding. Okay? The key thing is to remember, everybody knows what digital communication is, right? When I speak into something or if I, record a sound, it's going to be collected and encoded as ones and zeros, right? And no matter how many times you reproduce it, if it's digitally stored, it's always going to be produced as that exact same string of ones and zeros. If you ever get out of sync and lose one of those digits, the recording is worthless. So the recording, the encoding, and the decoding are exact mirrors of each other. Everybody understand that? Human communication does not work that way. Human communication is analog. So it is open to interpretation, and we're going to discuss a couple of models where that really becomes a big deal. Okay? Now, what I would encourage you to do is if you think somebody's saying something that you find offensive is to look at them and go, hold on a second, is this what you meant to say? A lot of times they're going to come back and go, no, I'm sorry, I misstated that. Okay? In relationships, when we talk about interpersonal relationships, one of the characteristics of interpersonal relations, especially one-on-one relationships, is the communication can actually become a source of conflict. Not your ideas, just how you communicate those ideas. Okay? So as a public speaker, can I talk to all 24 people in this class and say, do you understand what I meant to say there? No. One of the things I do to make sure that you're decoding what I encoded is to, try to create an environment where you can ask all the questions you want so that we can resolve any conflicts. Okay? Everybody understand that? Okay? Now, let's go back to some traditional models. This is Shannon and Weaver, okay, their linear model. After World War II, people began to wonder, how did Adolf Hitler pull that off? Okay? What the hell? So there was a lot of money being dumped into communication studies. And one of the first models that came out was Shannon and Weaver. We also started moving from just studying, how to make steel and how to grow more corn to sociology and more of the liberal arts. And Shannon and Weaver came up with this model, which is a perfectly good first model for anything. We have a sender, we have a receiver, we have a message, we have feedback. Does this not meet all of our required components for having communication? Does it fall into dialogic theory, though? No, because I send, you receive, then you send back. How many of y'all have conversations where you go, hey, how are you today? I'm quite fine. How are you? I am good. I am thinking about going to the store. Is there anything you would like for me to purchase for you? Why, yes, I would like for you to get some bread. What kind of bread? And go like that? No, you wind up going, hey, doing? Good. Going to the store, bread. I need bread. Make sure it's, and you're back and forth. It's not that discreet. But Shannon and Weaver were an important first step. So Newcomb in 1953 comes up with this ABX model. Now, what you notice about this was Newcomb stuck with the old sender-receiver labels, right? But you notice here that the communication is going both ways simultaneously. Okay, this was a leap ahead. And a lot of people said, well, a lot of academics said, well, that doesn't work in an academic environment. Because I am giving you commands. I am giving you information. I am lecturing. You know, even military, you know, you don't just give commands. Okay, there has to be an execution to it. And so what Newcomb in 1953 starts to say is, hey, look, there's a back and forth. In addition, you're not adding in the topic of the discussion, which is as important as the receivers. Now, topic, when you read his material, expands out to context as well. Okay? So Newcomb, this ABX model, people were just had their minds blown. They didn't think, you know, because remember also with the end of World War II, we begin to realize maybe pure hierarchical structures where there's one person one man at the top who's giving orders and you follow them blindly may not be the best idea in the world. Okay? So then Osgood and Schramm the next year come up with a completely different model. Okay? It's just a step further. You don't have a sender and receiver anymore. When you're engaged in communication, you have two interpreters who are both decoding and encoding simultaneously. They both have their own messages that they're trying to communicate. Does this look more like real life?
Yeah.
Okay? And again, I always throw back the basic communication model is two individuals who are involved in a relationship. Okay? And when you get in a fight, if you've known somebody for a long time, friend, spouse, business partner, whatever, if you've been in a lot of times when interpreter number one is encoding and sending their message, you're not even listening to them. You're already encoding your message and getting ready to fire back. Okay? Everybody understand that? This becomes what, in my opinion, one of the better models that come out of the 1950s. Because it is ongoing. It is a process and not an event. Okay? It says that we have different messages going within a conversation with all the participants. And again, you can expand this out to up to, it makes it to small group communication, which would be up to 12. Okay? Everybody get Schramm's model? Okay? So then we leap forward. The next big one comes from Barnland in 1970. And this is because those models really didn't cover public speaking or public communication environments like a classroom. And here you see he's just opened it up. This was an illustration that came up with later. I could show you actually Barnland's illustration, but it's got, I stopped counting one time at like 64 different parts. Okay, I mean, he went into great detail. So basically what you have is you have a speaker, you have a central sender, you have a message, a channel that goes out to multiple receivers. And while there's not a whole lot of encoding and decoding going on, there is a feedback loop, okay, that the sender should be engaged with. Sort of shifts the role of, from each person being an individual interpreter to a central sender to a group of receivers. And then that feedback is sort of as a collective group. Does everybody understand that? Okay? Now, the last model, I want you to take a look at it, and I'm going to take it off the screen. Okay? Dance in 1967 comes up with a model that I really, really like. And it's called the helical model. And it's based on the premise, and you need to remember this, all communications are irreversible. All communications are irreversible. What do you think I mean when I say that? You can't take it back. You can't unring a bell. Right? Because once you ring that bell, everybody's heard it, right? Everybody's seen the war movie or the cowboy movies where the guys are creeping along. And then the guy in the back always drops his rifle for no apparent reason, just to wake the Germans up. Okay? Once that sound is made, you can't take it back. Once you say something in a relationship, you can't take it back. Okay? Everybody in this room has been in an instance where they have been in usually a heated discussion where you suddenly say something, and even as you hear it going out of your mouth, before you're finished saying it, you sit there and you go, damn it, I wish I hadn't said that. Am I right? Because you have now, and usually, you know, my wife's relationship with her mother is complicated. Early on in our marriage, one time, I said, in the middle of, things were getting a little heated, and I said, yeah, well, this was in a couple of months. My mother-in-law did the best to make our wedding just a train wreck. Okay? She almost succeeded. Okay? One time, a couple of months after we got married, we were in a big fight. And, well, it was a medium-sized fight. And then I don't remember what my wife said, but I can tell you what I said. At least I'm not acting like your mother.
Yes.
And when I got to about at least, I went, this was a huge mistake in my head. And so even though it came out as at least I'm not acting like your mother, I didn't mean to say that. Am I getting that back?
No.
I'm telling you, 28 years later, I still hear about that. Okay? And she will still go when we're in a fight. I don't even know if she remembers the original context. She will say, when things are getting a little they don't get as tense now as they used to. But then she'll still say, I guess I'm acting like my mother, aren't I? And I'm like going, because if I got to come back to that, no, absolutely not. My comeback to that is, sorry. Should have never said that 28 years ago. All right, so let's start off. I'll get rid of this. Okay? So we're going to start off with two participants. We're going to call them X and Y. Okay? I'm not going to say sender or because in this example, in this model, both people are sending and receiving. Okay? So this is going to be Y1 or X1, and this is going to be Y1. Okay? X1 makes the initial communication. So we're going to see that they communicate. Now, that communication is going to alter the environment. Everybody understand that? Okay? So we're now no longer dealing with Y1. We have now moved to Y2. Because that's going to change every time you communicate with someone, especially during the early phases of a relationship or a communication environment. You're going to change the nature of that relationship, right? So you have encoded a message that makes perfect sense to you. You will communicate that to your other participant. They are affected and changed by that. So they respond. Okay? The response leads to X being changed. You now have X2. Everybody with me? Okay? And this goes on and on. Okay, and if I could draw it out in 3D and had a bit better, it would start looking like this and will become a helix. Okay, everybody understand that? Okay, this is based on the core central principle that human communication is irreversible.
And you can't go back to like Y2.
No, you'll never get back there.
Never.
That's done.
Yeah.
Okay?
You can't like bring it up again.
Nope.
Hey, remember that?
Nope.
No.
Because even by bringing it back up, you have altered the environment.
Right.
Think of somebody said that really pissed you off.
Right.
Okay? Could that person come back and say, oh, yeah, you know how I said you were a lazy slacker that was nothing but a burden on your mother and I? I didn't really mean that.
No.
Is that comment gone? No. And I don't know. I don't. That's something I came up with quickly.
I'm surprised you came up with that one.
What?
I'm surprised you came up with that one.
Oh, well, it's just, I usually go back to think, no, my parents, yeah, okay. I was going to say my parents never called me a lazy slacker. Okay, let's not go there. All right, everybody understand what we're saying here? Okay? So what does that mean to you when you walk up in front of a group and start a public speaking event?
Changing the environment.
Yeah, you may sit there and say, my introduction to this speech is crap, but you know what? I'm going to do it, and then I'll win them over when I get to the main body of the speech. Is that going to work?
Probably not.
It might, but at least, there's also a very good possibility that they're going to walk out of there going, well, okay, I kind of got what he was talking about, but what the hell was he talking about at the beginning? Didn't make any sense to me. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay. All right. So let's remember a couple of things. Human communication exists in a social context, which pretty much eliminates the phrase, well, that's not what I meant. Okay? Because if you're communicating with someone and you have information, or if you have a persuasive intent, okay, if you're there to entertain and it didn't go over well, you can't just blame the audience or blame the receivers, because all communication exists in a social context. Okay? Human communication is irreversible. Yeah, that's it. It's irreversible. You can't take it back. There's never a second chance to make a first impression. Everybody heard that before? Mm-hmm. Okay? Number 3. It has rules. Now, some of those rules are formal. Okay? Do you wear cutoffs on a t-shirt to a job interview?
No.
You do not. Does what you wear to a job interview communicate something?
Yes.
It does. Nothing else that communicates, how much you care about getting this job. Okay? But again, what are the rules? If I ask you what that meant as a hand gesture, what would you say if I look at you and I go, hey? What does that mean? It means okay. It means good, right? What happens if you do that in Japan?
I don't know. It might be very offensive.
It is incredibly offensive. You're calling them basically an a-hole. Okay? All right? What's that mean to an American?
Good job. Okay. All right.
What's that mean to an Arab?
Probably not good.
It's not good.
You don't really like the sound for flipping them off very much.
What?
Like, how the middle finger in social America, you flip them off.
Yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah, basically, because it's where that thumb is supposed to wind up at. Okay? And I'll let you work out the geometrics of that. Okay? Everybody knows what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's that? Peace. Anybody know what that is? It is very offensive in about half the world. Anywhere where there was a British colony or there was a British presence, that is the exact same as the middle finger. It goes all the way back to the Battle of Agincourt, where the French said when we beat the English army, because the English army's big weapon was the bowman, who used their 2 fingers to draw a bow. They said, we're going to take all the bowmen and we're going to cut their 2 fingers off. And as the French were marched off the field in Agincourt in defeat, they marched down this muddy road. And the English archers lined up on both sides and were sitting there doing that. They were showing them their bow fingers. So now, in much of Europe, if you do that, that's, yeah. And so if you go back and you look at the historic context, you place historic context, Winston Churchill, whenever anybody asks, hey, are we going to, do you have a message for Mr. Hitler? Churchill would always go. And if you saw that movie, The Darkest Hours, with Gary Oldman, they had to spin that and tell the news guy to say, tell them he flashed a V for victory. When really, if you got a message for Mr. Hitler, yeah. Okay? All right? It's all a matter of context, but it has rules. Okay?
Didn't Bush do that in Australia?
He did.
Yeah.
Bush
I remember.
Bush was driving through Sydney. He was going like, hey, how you doing? Hey, how's everybody? Victory, yeah, it's great. And everybody's going like, of course, in the Aussies, I thought, yeah, because they're Australians. Okay? All right. Communication is a learned behavior. Now, we tend to think that there are some things, and when you see Amy Cuddy's speech, I think we're going to do that on Wednesday. We tend to think that, like symbols like.
Does all this fall in social context?
No, this is all social context. These are just things to remember, generally about human communication. So Amy Cuddy will tell you that this is a universal gesture of success. Okay, that's a learned behavior. Okay, if you go back and if you look, there's only one universal that we've identified, one universal nonverbal communication. Anybody want to guess what it is? Nope. A hug? Nope.
Finger?
What?
No.
No, shaking your head? Nope, that's a learned behavior. Nope.
Swimming.
That's not a, that's a physical activity. Wait a minute, we're getting a.
You restate the question.
What is the only that we can determine non-learned communication?
Sadness from crying.
Nope.
Smile.
Yep, it's a smile.
Oh,
Because there have been instances where they have had children, infants that were born that were both deaf and mute, so they have no way of understanding any sort of visual cues or oral cues where they will tickle them and they will grin. It's the only one anybody's ever been able to determine. Okay? So almost all, without one exception, all of our human communications is learned. Okay? And then lastly, we're going to talk more about this later. Language is arbitrary. Okay. What is this thing here?
Door.
Door. Why do we call it a door? What? Because what?
Because somebody called it a door.
Because somebody called it a door and we all went, yeah, okay. Sure. What do you call this?
Marker.
It's a marker. Why do we call it a marker?
It's mark stuff.
Well, because it marks, and we all agree that if something that, if you write on something, it's a mark. So this is something that leaves a mark, so it's a marker. Okay, and what do they call this in France? Port. Why do they call it that in France? Because the French all agreed that's what we're going to call it.
I thought that was a bathroom.
What?
I thought that was a bathroom.
No.
No.
Okay? Now, in early language development, we think that a lot of things develop from onomatopoeias. And what's an onomatopoeia?
Something that sounds like.
Something that sounds like what it describes. Okay? Like a bee. Okay? Very simple language. All right? But language is arbitrary. Okay. Let's hold there. Okay? And we will get into ethics on Wednesday. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Say goodbye to the hybrid class.